in your words, what would you say the cycle of poverty is?
Cycle of poverty would be when a generation of children are born into impoverished conditions, so therefore don't have opportunities, educational, employment-wise, to improve their lives to the point where they can get out of poverty to then provide for the next generation better opportunities for them to increase. So it's almost like a fulfilling prophecy of if you're born poor, you don't have the opportunity to get yourself out of being poor. And so it just turns out to be a vicious circle.
So what circumstances do you think can lead to long-term poverty?
Long-term poverty, I would say lack of educational opportunities is the big one. Not providing skills necessary for people to move into higher paying jobs, etc. Along that with it, so it's easy to say just lack of education, but then you're like, okay, I have the smarts, but maybe I don't have the transportation to get to school. I don't have the financial resources available for me to use my education, so lack of financial aid, lack of transportation, and then just lack of family support, community support for that group to make that step into things that their parents haven't done. My parents didn't go to college, so I don't even know what college is, and so I don't have that like community support to push me up above that.
Okay, so why do you think that the cycle of poverty occurs?
I think for a lot of the reasons that I just said, but I also think, and this is fairly controversial, I think there is money to be made by keeping people poor. And so I think there are things set up by various corporations, by various whatever you want to think, like there is, from landlords to manufacturers of cheap food, right? Like I want people to buy Little Debbie snack cakes because I can get a dozen of them really cheap, right? And so along with that, I make money on food stamps, whatever. I think there's a corporate entity out there that depends on certain groups of people being poor so they can continue to make profits. So I think there are things set up within a capitalist system that demand that there are poor people.
So do you think that if they tried to make more laws to kind of limit that corporate barrier, that it would be way easier to get out of poverty?
I think so. Yep. I think that I do think that there needs to be more of an examination of capitalist practices to make sure that certain practices aren't unfairly taking advantage of other people. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so why do you think that which members of our society do you think suffer the most from this cycle of poverty?
Well, I think history and sociology just proves it's minorities, right? And that's a long history of that. But it is clear that when you take a look at the demographic breakdown of a country like the United States, there are certain percentages, X percentages are white, X percentage of African American, X percentage of Hispanic. And so therefore, in many ways, you would think that the poverty rate should reflect that, but unfortunately our history shows that poverty hits minority populations much, much harder. It's not to say that we don't have poor white people, but we do. But it's disproportionate towards minorities for many, many reasons. You just look at the history of the United States, it's kind of set up to make sure that certain minority groups have always been at the bottom of the poverty level.
So what minority groups do you think are usually sitting there at the bottom?
Yeah, African Americans, and I think what we are seeing an increase probably since the 60s and 70s is Latino Americans, right? Those two would be the largest groups. One that never gets mentioned that has been impoverished since almost the very beginning before we became a country are Native Americans. Native American population is way out of disproportion as far as the amount of impoverished people. You look at any Native American Indian reservation today, that's the number one issue is poverty, right? These are just some of the poorest of the poor, another thing, and they never quite get the notification or attention that probably deserves.
Do you think that segregation has contributed to the amount of poverty that happens in the United States?
Absolutely, no question. When you study the history of segregation, and it goes back to as soon as slavery was over, we just took with the 13th Amendment, and you just freed 4 million slaves. In many ways, you just took 4 million workers away from a very profitable industry. And so, from the very beginning, states, cotton landowners, they set up systems to keep people on those plantations. And through either sharecropping or various black codes, they did not want to lose this labor force. And so from the very beginning, that system was set up to keep these former slaves at an impoverished level. And then when you study the history of from 1880 till 1960, 1970, 1980, I think you're going to find evidence that certain groups want to make sure that this group, certain groups of people, especially African Americans, stayed at an impoverished level because they're easier to control.
Okay. So we had to like focus on like a city with poverty. So we chose Detroit.
Okay.
And so we had to come up with a solution as one of our things. And so we had an idea to make some low-income housing, as there's a lot of like abandoned buildings after the 2013 bankruptcy of Detroit. So we had an idea to like clear some of those out and maybe make more low-income housing that would make it so that more like homeless people or people who live on the streets could actually get into a home and maybe try to better themselves. What do you think of this idea, and do you think there's any other ways to like help make this idea like better?
I think that's a fantastic start. The next step would be, get you to have a little bit of more self-respect. I have a house. I'm not homeless, right? I have a place to live. And then, like you said, okay, what is the next step, right? What jobs can we make available, right? Can we do more community service types of jobs, right? We're going to provide you this housing now to help you pay for this housing, or to pay me back for giving you this housing. Can we create a job where you are doing something for Detroit, right? Could it be something as simple as like, you are going to help us clean up these areas? Are you going to help us run, food pantries or whatever? Some small job where now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I've given you, now you help me give back. Not just me as the owner of the housing thing, but to our community, trying to build up on that, build that community spirit thing, and see where that would flourish. You want to get them to work, right? Get them housing. I totally agree with that. Get them off the streets. Now, how can we get you to work? And again, not just for the job, but more for your self-respect.
So there's like I'm pretty sure there's like a decently large drug problem in Detroit. There's a lot of drug users. So do you think for that to work, people would have to go to, what is it called? Rehab first?
Yeah. All right. I think you're exactly right. You gotta address the problems. Why is there a drug issue, right? Most of the people that I would say, like, if they're homeless and on drugs, probably, I'm not speaking for them, but they would love to not be on drugs. All right. So what resources are you going to be available to that? Again, just making people feel more human, and showing them that they have a value and they're important to this community. And so, rehab, different programs like that. Addressing why are we turning to drugs? Is it a poverty issue that turns us to drugs? And then follow the money. Who's making money on these drugs, and why do they keep bringing them to those communities?
And do you have any ideas that you might think would work to help people in poverty?
I think improving some of the structure to make it a better education more available to them. It's the easy thing to say. It's like, okay, you should just get a job. You get a job, you get better skills, right? So go to community college, get a trade or whatever. But we have to address it bigger than that. It starts at the very earlier stages of elementary school, middle school, high school. Like, are your public school systems really meeting the needs of those people? And are you eliminating all the barriers? Like I was saying earlier, like, do you have the opportunity, can we get kids to college? Literally, can we drive them? Or do they have the opportunities? Is there a better bus system? Is there, do we have the transportation in that? Do they have the support that they need once they are there, right? I was just reading an article anyway, like a school in Chicago, heavily minority, claims 100% of their students are accepted into four-year college, but only 40% enroll. It's like, okay, the school got you smart enough to get into college, but why aren't you enrolling? Well, financial aid, transportation, some of those other issues that we've got to address. But I think the key is improving job skills, which is education.
Okay, thanks for your time.
Yeah,
I think
no
we should
problem.
be okay.
Yeah.